Hello everyone, welcome to my SFL series where we talk about systemic functional linguistics. And this is the first video in the series, by the way, where we will have a brief introduction to these linguistic theories. Now, let's take a look at the outline. Okay, these are what this video will cover, but of course, not in detail. We will talk about these, especially the core as a concept, uh, in detail in the future. So in this video, we will have a brief revisit of linguistics, and then we will jump into SFL, where we will look at its definition and brief history. Then we will move to its core concepts, just a brief overview before we conclude it. If you like this video, consider subscribing to this channel and sharing it with people who may need it. So without further ado, let's talk. Alright, before we talk about systemic functional linguistics or SFL, let's take a short moment to revisit linguistics itself. What it means, how it is studied, and how different approaches view language. As we can see here, linguistics is the scientific study of language. It looks at how language works, how words, meanings, and grammar come together to help us communicate. Linguistics doesn't focus on learning a particular language like in English or Indonesian. Instead, it studies language in general, how human beings use and understand language as part of their everyday life. So, linguists or the experts of language don't just ask, what does this sentence mean? They ask, why do we say it this way? What does it show about how language functions? Okay. Over time, linguists have developed different ways of understanding language. One common distinction is between the formal and functional orientation. Formal linguists Formal linguistics focus on the structure of language. It looks for the internal rules that organize sounds, words, and sentences. For example, Chomsky's theory of generative grammar tries to explain the mental rule that makes sentence formation possible. On the other hand, the functional linguistics focuses on how language is used to make meaning. It sees language as a social tool, something people use to achieve purposes in communication, the social purpose. Halliday's systemic functional linguistics, which we will discuss later, belongs to this tradition, this linguistic orientation. So, in short, formal linguistics asks how is language structured, while functional linguistics asks how is language used to create meaning in context. Both perspectives are important, but they look at language from different angles. And now we move to the purpose, the red box here. Okay, we have here theoretical and applied linguistics. Theoretical linguistics tries to describe and explain how language works, to build models of grammar, meaning, and sound. Now, while the applied linguistics uses that knowledge from the theoretical linguistics to solve real-life problems such as in language teaching, translation, language testing, and so on. For example, When linguists study how students write essay in English, they are applying linguistic theories to help improve language learning and teaching. So, theoretical linguistics focuses on understanding language, while applied linguistics focuses on using that understanding to help people. Okay, and then we see uh, the mode of inquiry. Linguists can also be distinguished by their mode of inquiry or how they study language. We have here descriptive linguistics, which observes how people actually use language, and then prescriptive linguistics, which tells people how they should use language. So, prescriptive linguistics see, for example, grammar as a rule, yeah, but descriptive linguistics see a grammar or the grammar that people use in communication just as it is. And then we have comparative linguistics, which compares, as the name suggests, it compares different languages to find patterns or relationships between languages. Today, most linguists take a descriptive approach because they want to understand how language naturally works in real communication. So, to summarize this slide, linguistics is the scientific study of language. It can be formal or functional in orientation. It can be theoretical or applied in purpose, and it can be descriptive, prescriptive, or comparative in its mode of inquiry. Understanding these categories help us to see where systemic functional linguistics fits. SFL belongs to functional, applied, and descriptive side of linguistics. It studies how language is used to make meaning in context, especially in education and real communication. All right, moving forward. So now that we have revisited what linguistics is and how it can be viewed from different orientations, purpose, and mode of inquiry, let's move to one of its major traditions, systemic functional linguistics or SFL. Earlier, we talked about how linguistics can be formal or functional in orientation, and how it can also be theoretical or applied in purpose. SFL itself fits mainly on the functional side. It focuses on how language works to make meaning in real context, rather than only describing the structure or form of sentences. But it's also applied, and we are right to say that. SFL is not only a theory of language, but it is also a theory that can be used to analyze text, to teach language, and to understand how people use language for different social purposes in society. In other words, SFL is both theoretical framework for describing how language functions and a practical tool that can be applied in fields like education, discourse analysis, translations, literacy studies, language testing and assessments, and so on. Now, let's look at the name itself. Uh, each part of the name tells us something important. Systemic here means that language is a network of choices. When we speak or write, we constantly choose words and structures to express meanings that fit our purpose and context. For example, when we talk with our supervisor or people superior than us, we choose different words compared to a situation where we talk with our peers or our children or students, for example. And then functional means that every choice we make in language serves a function. Uh, it helps us represent ideas, interact with others, or organize our message. We will see this later. And of course, linguistics, the term linguistics in systemic linguistics, functional linguistics, reminds us that this is a study of how language works. So, when we talk about SFL, we are looking at language as a meaning making system. We are interested in how grammar, vocabulary, or lexicogrammar in SFL terms and structures are shaped by what we want to say and by the situation we are in. That is what makes SFL different from formal linguistics, which focuses more on abstract rules and sentence structure. SFL connects grammar with meaning and context. In short, SFL is a functional and applicable approach to linguistics that helps us see how language operates as a resource for making meaning in everyday communication. Okay. In the next, we will take a quick look at the history of SFL, where it came from, who developed it, and how it has evolved over time. Now that we know what SFL is in general, let's take a quick look at where it came from and how it developed. Systemic functional linguistics was mainly developed by Michael Alexander Kirkwood Halliday, a British linguist who began shaping this theory in the 1960s. Halliday wanted to describe how language actually works in everyday life, not just as a system of forms, but as a resource for making meaning in context. But he didn't start from zero. He built his theory on ideas from earlier scholars. One key influence was Bronislaw Malinowski, an anthropologist who introduced the concept of context of situation, which later become registered in the SFL concept. He argued that to understand what people mean, we have to look at the social and cultural situation in which language is used. And then Firth was a Halliday's teacher uh, who took Malinowski's idea and made it part of linguistic theory. Firth emphasized that meaning depends on context, that we cannot study language without understanding how it functions in social interaction. Halliday then expanded these ideas into a comprehensive model of language, a model that connects grammar, meaning, and context. He called it systemic functional linguistics because it sees language as a system of choices, and every choices we make serves as a function in communication. Over time, Halliday's work inspired many others. Among them was Rukai Hassan, who was both his wife and a leading linguist. Hassan made major contributions to SFL, especially in explaining how context shapes meaning and how language reflects social life and learning. Other important scholars such as Christian Martinson and Jim Martin, who also extended Halliday's ideas into areas like systemic grammar, genre-based approach, and discourse analysis. Today, SFL continues to influence many fields, from education and language teaching to translation studies and social research. In language education, in particular, SFL has inspired genre-based approach, which helps students understand how language works in different types of text. So, in short, SFL grew out of a long tradition that connects language, meaning, and context. From Malinowski's anthropology, Firth's linguistics, to Halliday's comprehensive theory, which is called semantic system, uh, social semantics, or something like that. And now that we know how and where SFL come from, let's move on to understand its core concepts, such as text and context, strata, metafunction, and register. These ideas will show us how SFL actually describes language as a meaning-making system. Alright, and now we come to the core SFL concepts. Uh, it covers four main concepts: the text and context, strata, metafunction, and register. We start with text and context. First, Halliday defines text as a stretch of language of any length that functions as a unit of meaning. This means that a text can be a word, a sentence, a clause, a paragraph, or a longer discourse as long as it conveys meaning as a whole. A text meaning is always shaped by its context, the situation, the participants, the purpose, and the culture in which it is produced. So SFL emphasizes that meaning emerges from the interaction between text and context, not from isolated sentences or words. Okay, and then we have strata. Language in SFL is organized into different levels called strata, which show how meaning is realized in language. The main strata are discourse semantics, meaning at the level of the text or discourse, focuses on meaning in use, in context, rather than isolated sentence meanings. And then uh, from the discourse semantics derived lexicogrammar, the words and grammatical structure used to realize the meaning. For example, she gave a presentation versus a presentation was given by her expresses the same idea in different forms. And then we have phonology and graphology, the sounds of speech or the written symbols used to realize text. So the strata show how hierarchical relationship meaning at semantic level is realized through grammar, through lexicogrammar, which in turn is realized through sounds or writing. That is strata. The next core concept is metafunction and register. Halliday uses the term metafunction rather than just function because language serves multiple functions simultaneously. So that's why in SFL we don't call it language function but language metafunctions. The three metafunctions are ideational, representing ideas and experiences, interpersonal, enacting social roles and relationships, and then textual, organizing information into coherent messages. Even a single clause carries all three metafunctions, though some may be more prominent depending on the context. And then we come to register. Register explains how context influence language choices. It depends on three variables: field, tenor, and mode. A field uh, concerns with what is happening, like the topic or the activity, and then the tenor uh, concerns with who is involved in the social roles, the relationship between the speaker and the addressee, or the listener, or the right between the writer and the reader, and then mode. Mode is the channel of communication, whether it is a spoken communication, written communication, whether it is digital, through phones, email, and so forth. Metafunctions and register are closely connected. A metafunction describes the types of meaning that language carries, whether it is interpersonal, ideational, or textual meanings, and then register explains how context shapes which meanings are emphasized and which linguistic forms are chosen. So, to summarize what we have discussed, or talk about systemic functional linguistics. SFL views language as a tool for making meaning in context. Its core concepts, text and context, strata, metafunctions, and register, help us to see how meaning, form, and context are connected in real-life communication. Understanding these ideas prepares us to analyze text more effectively and notice how language choices reflect the situation, participants, and purpose. Looking ahead, we will explore this concept in more detail in the next videos. Hopefully, we will start with metafunctions, looking closely at the additional, interpersonal, and textual functions. Then we will dive into register, examining its three variables, including the field, tenor, and mode, to see how context shape the choices speakers and writers make. So stay tuned and get ready to see Isabel in action, step by step, as we explore how meaning is created and realized in different texts and contexts. Thank you for watching.